James, can you move me forward?
Actually, I did.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, James, why don't you pick it up because I'm kind of stuck here.
How's that?
Nope.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay. Go for it. Oh, I understand.
Right. James, I'm not seeing the slide moving forward. So anyway, regardless, everyone, I'm sorry I'm wasting your time here. So I'm Mike Batistella. I'm presenting with James White. James is the president and founder of Mainframe IT, located in Princeton, New Jersey. James has spent much of his career in the Fortune 1000 to 100 consulting space as a senior consultant and architect, focuses large, complex migration projects, pre-sales engineering, and significant time in the Fortune 50 space as well. Across his career, he's assisted national and global clients alike in pharmaceutical, investment, banking, insurance, military, aerospace, entertainment, and electronics manufacturing. Hey, we're talking to you today about governance, risk management, and compliance as a service, kind of what the market's looking like. And as especially companies in the SMB space, what they might be looking for and need in a service provider that focuses on GRC. So James, why don't you take it from here?
Sure thing. Okay, so just like in this true story from 1991, what if weather conditions are aligning that'll have profound impact on the small and medium-sized business markets? For our purposes today, we'll use a construction analogy to represent small, medium, and large-sized businesses or segments. I'll also be collectively referring to the small and medium-sized business segment as SMBs and large business as enterprise. A few months back, I heard a former FBI agent explain the impact of cyber damage to businesses in dollars, which I thought was profound. By impact, what we're talking about is the breadth, frequency, and financial impact of incidences increasing in an exponential way, which I'll collectively refer to as velocity. If we look at this chart, what we'll see is that between 2015 to 2021, there was a full doubling in trillions of dollars damage-wise. And it looks like by the time we go another 6 years forward to 2027, we'll have doubled again. So in regards to the three market segments, which of the three are targeted the most? And the answer to that is the SMB market. This slide's only showing us small businesses. But if we look back here to 2011, we can see that there was a trend that was just going up to get us to this point here. And so now we've identified the first of three weather patterns emerging. Frequency and financial impact is dramatically increasing. SMBs are the target. Okay, so what about the next weather pattern? For this, let's take a sobering look at the state of IT and SecOps capabilities, starting first across all market segments. In 2016, cybersecurity expert Bruce Schreiner was quoted in a ZDNet article. And I had to shorten it a little bit, but he said these numbers are going there's a numbers game that's going to change here as the effectiveness of the criminal gets greater until it gets so dangerous that you just need more security than you can afford and more time than you have. I inserted that. He argued, adding that soon this will reach a tipping point of no return. So in simple terms, if this came true, it would mean that IT and SecOps teams are essentially drinking water from a fire hose every day. Next, let's take a look at how the software and hardware companies are doing at producing secure solutions for businesses. So here we're looking at vulnerabilities, and we're looking up here in the 2018 space. Almost 17,000 disclosed in 2018. 28 of them were exploitable per week. So clearly, the velocity and breadth of threats is accelerating exponentially, in fact. In the IT industry, 2 to 50 vendors per any given category is the norm. In the cybersecurity sector, however, over 800 vendors have been funded. So the question is, how are they doing? Well, in December of 2020, we got our answer when we learned that for over a year, threat actors had been lurking inside the Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Treasury, Justice, and 18,000 private sector companies. In fact, some of the 18,000 infiltrated companies were well-known players in the cybersecurity space. And bear in mind, every org in this list and many of the 18,000 have massive budgets and dedicated SecOps teams, all narrowly focused on only their IT environments. Ultimately, the discovery was made by an attentive help desk admin who just happened to spot something not looking right with a user account. So we have a good idea, good understanding of where we're at in regards to the tipping point and where larger organizations are at in their ability to defend themselves. Let's next understand the differences in how IT is delivered between SMBs and enterprises. So here we're going to use a color code to represent the skill sets of IT staff, starting with tier 1 entry-level staff all the way up to tier 4, where of course we find the most experienced and highly paid staff. In the enterprise, teams of higher skilled IT staff are organized around practice areas with a comparatively smaller service desk servicing the end users. For SMBs serviced by managed service providers, we find that in most cases, not only are the headcount to skill set ratios inverted, but practice area skill sets are largely replaced by generalist skill sets, which prevent MSPs from delivering the kind of engineering depth that enterprises benefit from. Meaning less automation, more resilience on labor to deliver configuration and service. In terms of service delivery, practice area teams in the enterprise are engaged in continual service improvement, and for the most part, focused on a single IT environment. MSPs must support many smaller, disparate IT environments using management tools that pale in comparison to what the enterprise has at its disposal. While MSPs do a great job of providing proactive monitoring and patching, continual service improvement is all but non-existent. And remember, SMBs are the target, right? So this is also a good place to pause and state that my purpose here is not to bash MSPs, SecOps teams, or the 800 players in the cybersecurity space, as all of these are both good and necessary. Rather, my intent is to take a sobering look at where we're at, like really at, and especially so as we consider the last weather condition of our perfect storm. Let's keep going. So since end users are the ones that invite threat actors into a network, let's take a quick look at how we're doing with the basic things like email filtering and scanning web traffic for threats. So where we're at today with email security is only 20% of businesses have implemented DKIM and DMARC policies, which provide recipient mail systems a 100% guarantee as to the identity of the sender. As vendors who make mail security systems know this, they have no choice but to default to reasonable security or reasonable certainty for 80% of the senders they receive mail from, meaning for those messages they can't fully flag as threats, they'll err on the side of the receiving user and let the message through. What about stopping threats through web surfing or when links are clicked in an email? How are we doing there? Well, 20 years ago, filtering appliances did a great job of keeping threats out from the network, shown here in the green. Back then, nearly all traffic passing through them was inspectable. However, as most connections to the web are now encrypted, as shown in the black, web filtering appliances have become largely blind to most traffic passing through them. It's not that businesses can't inspect 100%. It's just that for a number of reasons, like DKIM and DMARC with email security, it's not the easiest thing for IT to implement. Here's the stats. So if we're focusing just on recent years, we see that 96% of organizations allow 85% of their traffic through to end user PCs completely uninspected. And conversely, only 4% of businesses are inspecting everything. This is staggering. And so the second weather condition of our perfect storm is, simply put, the sobering truth. For certain, we're past the tipping point, and the industry as a whole is playing constant defense against threat actors moving at combat speed. SMBs are the #1 target, and the IT delivery model differences between SMBs and enterprise are concerning in the face of today's challenges. And lastly, organizations of all sizes, well, we're not doing a very good job of defending the most common entry points. Last weather condition. So again, we look back to our 3 market segments, putting SMBs down on the left, and we ask the question, what if? What if SMBs had to bear the same burdens of reporting, governance, and bureaucracy of large corporations? And what if the amount of time consumed in these endeavors for SMB owners and management was significant? And that aside, what if it doubled the cost of what they were already spending on IT and cybersecurity services? What if the unintended consequences of all of this actually increased risk for the small and medium-sized business market? So for example, on the topic of insurance, what if a claim won't be paid due to exclusions, more of which are being added every year? Or what if certain types of incidences are just flat out excluded? This too is becoming common. What if the inability to increasingly meet large company requirements prohibits SMBs from purchasing insurance to begin with? Or what if in exchange for lower rates, or coverage at all, technologies offered by insurance companies surface significant shortcomings in the IT delivery models of SMBs. What if the legislation being written around cyber and privacy was also spinning up enforcement agencies within each state that'll be 100% funded from the fines levied against businesses, or restated, levied post-incident against a co-victim of cybercrime, not the cyber criminals themselves? And finally, on the topic of governance, risk management, and compliance, what if GRC platforms being adopted by large corporations make them agile enough to really vet downstream vendors? What will the manifold costs be for SMBs in regards to either addressing the requirements or foregoing the revenue? And so with that, we have our last weather condition, GRC, governance, risk management, and compliance. And of course, it's all three of these conditions combined that give us the perfect storm. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mike Batistella. Mike Batistella likes to say that he wears three hats. Mike's primary role is the president of Solutions Cubed, an award-winning IT service management and cybersecurity consulting training organization. Solutions Cubed provides full lifecycle IT management and cybersecurity solutions in the commercial and federal markets. Mike is also responsible for government solutions for the DVMS Institute, and Mike is North American Regional Director for Cybersecurity Professionals. These two organizations focus on cybersecurity career development and teaching organizations of any size how to build an adaptive, cyber-resilient digital value management system capable of creating, protecting, and delivering digital business value to clients and stakeholders. Mike would also like to thank everyone, would like everyone to know how much he appreciates the huge response and attendance to this conference. The shot of this on this slide was taken outside the auditorium. It's overwhelming. Mike, have you wiped back the tears? Are you ready to start?
I'm ready. Thank you so much, James.
Okay.
Awesome. Let's dive right into it. So, in the perfect storm, James was saying a lot of what if, and what if. And the truth is, the what if scenario is we're in the middle of it right now. It's actually happening. So I do spend a lot of time in the federal space, and in that federal space, there's a mandate for us federal contractors, the NIST 800-171 compliance requirement. Out of the thousands and thousands of federal contractors, that assessment was due November of 2021. And so here we are, into 2022 and pretty far past that. So there is a compliance requirement. And the interesting thing, out of those thousands and thousands of federal contractors, many of them, a large percentage of them, are small businesses. And they're having a very difficult challenge with the NIST 800-171 requirement, going into CMMC, the cybersecurity maturity model certification that is bearing down on us as well. So what we're really focused on is how are SMBs handling this, when the reality is that actually these requirements that many large enterprise organizations have are currently being mandated of our federal contracting community, but also through the executive order that came out in May of 2021. The executive order is basically calling out that we are going to focus on strengthening our cybersecurity. And if any of the attendees are interested in knowing more about that executive order, we're doing an entire presentation on that tomorrow. And you'll see just what's currently happening. So from a problem perspective, GRC is no less important to SMBs as they are to the large organizations. They have similar compliance requirements. It's different on the scale that they're looking at it. So having a model that overlays and is able to scale or downsize or upsize depending on what's needed. So the other issue with SMBs is many of them, they don't have adequate budgets. They don't have the adequate staff. They're typically shorthanded. They're typically under budget allocated. So it's very tough for them to bring in the right folks and the right set of tools and whatnot. So what's happening in the small business, especially in the small and micro-sized businesses, they're really leaning on their MSPs to not only take care of their IT needs, but also their security needs, and we'll be leaning on them from a GRC standpoint. Many MSPs or many of these small companies are looking at their managed service provider as a managed security service provider. And oftentimes the MSP is they're treating security from a endpoint protection, patching, firewall issue, but not all of the other kinds of requirements that would be associated with a typical GRC scenario. So, and what's also happening is many of the MSPs are just not ready to take on GRC as an offering, or they're beginning to take it on as their offering, but maybe they don't have the right kind of platform to use, the right set of tools, the right automation, the right skill sets on their team to be able to handle that. So we're seeing in the training space, we're seeing a lot of MSPs that are starting to realize that this is becoming an important piece, and they need to start ramping their folks up on it. So one of the things that the small businesses are struggling with is, if I'm going to look at a GRC service provider, if I'm going to look at GRC as a service through my MSP, what should I be looking for? And oftentimes we don't even know the right questions to ask. So hopefully we can go into some of that. And James is doing that right now for me. So some of the questions that would need to be asked, if I'm looking for, or if my clients are looking at an MSP or somebody offering GRC as a service, I think last year, well, I don't think I know, last year I presented Roadmap to Compliance at the same conference. And if anyone is interested in getting a copy of that, please send me a message and I'll get that out to you. But I went through a number of different scenarios. How do we achieve compliance? And it was more technique and approach. And am I using spreadsheets? Am I using compliance platform? Do I have the skill set and technical chops? Do I not? So I went through a number of different scenarios. But at this point, I would say, working with somebody that's using a spreadsheet to achieve compliance or help with compliance, and they're not using a GRC platform, first and foremost, I would just do the assumptive, what compliance framework are you adhering to? That's an important one, because there's a number of different frameworks. We're obviously focused on NIST, the CSF, and also the RMF would come into it, but there's a number of other frameworks out there. So which ones are you adhering to? And even jumping ahead a little bit, what platform are you planning on using? So that becomes real important. And it's also important to understand what resources, capabilities does that MSP or GRC as a service provider, what kind of resources do they have? Have they been certified in those frameworks? Do they have the technical chops to really do what you would need to have them do to have a good GRC program? What skill sets does the team have? I always, dealing with SMPs on that side of the equation, I always say that, each individual that's part of the IT staff or the security team, typically they have 3 to 5 skill sets. And, 2 or 3, they're really, really good at. 4 and 5, they're pretty good at. And then they start getting, they're dabbling and whatnot. The whole benefit of using an MSP is the fact that they have a bench, they have a lot of different resources. And if each one of those resources has 3 to 5 skill sets, you can get a lot of area covered. So what you're really looking for is, if you're going to be providing GRC as a service for me, do you have the skill sets on your team to cover the bulk of the areas? That becomes real important. And then what kind of change controls are you going to put around any supporting artifacts? So one of the things that drives me a little crazy, to be quite honest with you, is the focus of assessment audit. It seems to be meet the deadline. We're being audited at this certain time, and the goal being pass the audit. That's the focus. And then what happens when the audit is passed? Okay, we got through that one, could you pass the mustard? I like to say. And what I mean by that is, it just goes business back to usual. It's just, okay, we got through that. We passed the audit, boom. And then, the following year when we need to self-assess, or 2-3 years down the road when we need to go through it again, it's right back from, starting from scratch. So I'm always encouraging, my customers to take your supporting artifacts, put those under change control the same way you would with, IT devices, network devices, or components, documentation, whatever it is, put it under change control. And so build in a continual service improvement mentality. And if you're always improving, if you're always doing better than you did you did the month before, the quarter before, the year before, if you've passed the audit once, you should always be able to pass it again. And the goal that I'd like to achieve with my clients is that auditor could show up at the site, call you from the parking lot and say, I'm on my way in to do your unplanned assessment, and you would feel no stress whatsoever because you're ready for it. The other thing you need to be asking for is, what type of commitment would we expect that the MSP would need from us? And typically it's a significant investment. You're the only one that knows what capabilities you have. Your organization is the one that knows what the documentation is and where the artifacts are and what state they're in. They're going to need that information. So you're going to be involved in, and even as you bring in either someone doing GRC as a service or your MSP to help you, or a consulting company like ours to help get you there, you got to remember that you as the organization, you own the results of that audit. You own the state of your environment and whatnot from a security control standpoint. So you need to be involved. That's an important piece. Don't look at it as, we have XYZ company doing this for us, we're all set. You need to be involved. You need to be know what's going on. And then also you want to know, if we're going to have system security plans or policies, procedures, who's creating those policies and procedures, who's creating the security plan, and who's going to make sure they stay up to date and manage. And I already mentioned the platform, so I'll jump to the next slide.
All right.
Okay, so the way ahead plan. You know what the issue is. If you're going to take it on yourself, or you're going to bring in somebody to help you with it. But it's important to have a way ahead plan. So be sure to select a provider that clearly is qualified, that has the technical chops to take this on, that is certified and is they have past performance. They've done this before. They've helped companies prepare for an audit. They've done it within their own organization internally, and make sure that they're not only there to help you through the readiness portion, but through the audit itself, and then beyond the audit. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Once the audit is done, it's not done. You've completed the audit, but you continue the process. So have that continual service improvement, the same as we talk about on the ITIL side of the house. Have that continual service improvement mentality that says, here's what we're doing. We always want to get better. The other thing is to make sure that you have clearly defined the roles and responsibilities of the people, not only on your team that are going to be participating, but also on the team of the GRC as a service or your MSP provider. What role are they playing? What role are you playing? What's the communication going to look like? Make sure that that's been all worked out. And as I mentioned, understand that it's not a one and done. It is an ongoing process, and have combining that understanding that it's an ongoing process and building in a continual service improvement mindset will really help you be constantly prepared and always improving. So things to consider. The audit is the starting point. It's not the final destination. This is more in summary. Take a continual improvement approach. Training is a must. It's an absolute must. And that training has to do with, not necessarily the technology that's part of the solution, but the training in how we do things. What are the processes and procedures that we're going to wrap around this thing? So, I just finished writing an article for the Meadowlands USA magazine, and I literally got into this part of the discussion where in ITIL, they talk about people, process, and technology, and no one gives it a second thought because we've been saying it since 1998, people, process, and technology. On the cyber side, we tend to be very technology focused. I heard it from the keynote speakers today. I was so glad to hear that there's an understanding that it's no longer just a technology solution. It really is. People are involved, process and procedures are involved, workflow automation is involved. It really is a mix of these kinds of things. So, when processes have been defined, what are the KPIs we're going to be looking at? How are we going to measure those KPIs? What kind of reporting are we going to do? What actions are we going to take to evaluate the data and to make those improvements? So remember, it really is a people, process, technology kind of approach. And in your relationship with your MSP, become a strategic partner. You don't want it to be adversarial. They don't want it to be adversarial. You really want to make it that we are in this together. We're working together for a common goal. Yes, there's a business side of it involved for sure, but you want to become a strategic partner as the SMB with your MSP. And MSPs, you want to become a strategic partner for your customers and be able to keep them safe and secure. Making sure that security focus, doing the things now to become as secure as possible. It's really important. We are in a really important time where not only has the threat never been as worse as it is today, but we know that quantum computing is right around the corner. And once that hits, a lot of the things that we're doing today are no longer going to be adequate. So instead of being so far behind that there's no way to catch up, get as far ahead of the curve as you can. So when quantum computing hits, you're adjusting and upgrading and enhancing. You're not starting from scratch. That's going to be a tough one. Remember that stronger, because we're at the Stronger conference, stronger cybersecurity is best for all of us. It's not just another compliance requirement. We've got to look at it that this is really an important thing. It's not the goal of GRC is not to pass an audit. The goal of GRC is to make you, your organization, and our nation more secure. So James, as we kind of wrap up here and ask for some questions, do you have some closing thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have one thought. You said you made a great point about just being, if the assessor calls and they're like in your parking lot, you just want to be ready to respond to them. So on the positive side of GRC, as we're looking into the future for SMBs, if you're prepared from a GRC perspective, you're also prepared to answer your insurance company and any enforcement agencies that are asking about how you're set up. And so from that perspective, it's just a huge time saver because you can just kind of make those problems go away and focus on business instead of this stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So do we have any questions from our attending audience? I'd love to hear from them. James, while we're waiting on that,
we're tight on time too, actually.
Well, I think Evan's going to be good and not kick us off. He'll give us a few minutes maybe. But James, what are you seeing with the insurance providers? What kind of constraints are you seeing? And I'll share the same what I'm seeing.
For certain, I sit on an industry think tank, so I have kind of a special insight into what's going on. But markets are tightening up. It's getting harder and harder to buy cyber insurance. A lot of insurance companies, because they're getting their clocks cleaned, they're getting out of the business, or they're trying to make it work by using the extra insurance markets, the reinsurance markets. So you have to kind of like cobble different insurances together to build a whole policy. The amounts of cyber insurance coverage that a company could buy are much smaller than they used to be, like way too small actually. And then some of the other points I actually made in the slide deck, right? Just an increase in exclusions, or in some policies they're actually excluding, paying out on ransomware or BEC. So these are pretty serious things for sure.
Yeah, and it used to be. Not that long ago, whenever there was a very highly visible breach, the insurance agents, the insurance companies love the influx of business. I don't want to say they love the fact that there was a breach, but there certainly was an increase in business. And I know a number of folks that are in the insurance industry and cyber, and they would see a spike every time, and it was good for business. But then all of a sudden, with the payouts, the cost of ransomware, I think is averaging around 130,000 right now. So if it's at that number, we know that there's a whole lot that are less, and there's a whole lot that are significantly more. And it was really putting insurance companies, out of business, or really putting them at risk. So I'm seeing them, as you mentioned, a lot more concerned about, what's being done, how it's being done. And if you're not at a certain level, security rating, security scorecard kind of rating, they're not going to take you on until you get some things fixed. So as you mentioned, having this GRC model set up and functioning well is certainly going to help people
Actually,
get their insurance.
I'll take your point one step further, Mike. I've actually seen technology that some of the insurance companies are looking at where they're actually going to be able to drop agents in a Kubernetes container into a network and do like a vulnerability scan around through everything. And I think a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, maybe they have like pristine patch reports that they get from their MSP. Well, vulnerability management is a completely other thing. And so you could have an all green patch report, but your vulnerability management report looks horrible, right? And so these kinds of tools are going to surface these types of issues. So it's going to be very interesting. And it might not, it might just impact, maybe these tools will just be used probably just for MSPs that want to be able to get access to better rates, that type of thing. I don't think the insurance companies are going to be able to force the use of these things, but who knows what could happen. Look at the trends. Absolutely. I mean, the trends are pretty scary, actually.
Right. Well, everyone, we want to thank you for attending. Appreciate your patience with the initial startup that was on me. Dr. Fabio, I'll respond to your question offline afterwards. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us and look forward to doing this again with you sometime soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. All right. James, I will see you.
I'll call you in a sec.